Salam with Bacon Mahi My Barracuda. I am Imam Icy. They call me Imam Icy because I give you the cold, hard truth about the wonderful religion of Al-Islam. I am back by popular demand and here today to talk to you about the miraculous preservation of the Quran. This is truly one of the areas that Islamophobes attack most. For centuries, we Muslims have known that we have one miraculously preserved Quran, perfectly preserved to the word, letter, and dot. We know all this, yet Islamophobes continue to attack. In this video, I'm going to tell you what to think about the miraculously preserved Quran by giving you some opinions of prominent Muslim voices who have influenced me over the years. Voices you can trust. But I'm going to do more than that. I'm also going to give you some examples of how Islamophobes will try to undermine your faith in the miraculous Quran. So let's begin. The most important thing to know before we start is there is one perfectly preserved Quran with no variants. There's no need to think deeply or critically about this issue. Such thinking can result in doubt.
Qalun or Duri or other readings are not different Qurans. They are one text being read slightly differently. All of those variants, all of those slight variants are directly traceable back to the Prophet. And this is where the scholars have this opinion that they actually originate in the ahruf, those 7 modes.
Got you.
So these slight variations of readings of the same text of the Quran, which we saw on the screen from the 1st century, originate in those 7 modes. This is one of the opinions. And scholars have many other opinions on the nature of ahruf and their relation to the Qira'at.
Notice how the pseudo-scholar disguised as a Muslim is actually undermining the faith of Muslims. He names multiple Qurans or types of Qurans or whatever, but then says that they're the same Quran. So 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus however many ones equals 1. Are Muslims doing math like the Christians now? And then he says something about ahruf. Nobody even knows what that is. And why do Muslim scholars have different opinions on these things, supposedly? How can perfect preservation have different opinions? Finally, it doesn't help at all to talk about variants and then correct yourself to say small variants.
All of those variants, all of those slight variants.
No, wallahi, there is one perfectly preserved Quran. There are no variants, but this is just an example of the types of things that you'll hear these days. Now, take it from a real Muslim authority.
The Muslim claim has been for the last 14 centuries that the Quran is absolutely word by word preserved.
If music wasn't forbidden in Islam, that would be music to my ears. For the last 14 centuries, it's been the Quran, not multiple Qurans, and it's word for word preservation. Wherever you go in the Muslim world, it's the same. It always has been. There are no other scholarly opinions. There are no variants. It's as simple as that. That is the standard. We can call it the standard narrative for short. Now, we could end the video here. We've made our point. But unfortunately, I have to show you another example of a pseudo-intellectual undermining our faith in Quran preservation. That white man on the right is a young Muslim trying to understand more about the preservation of the Quran. He is, unfortunately, talking to an Islamophobe who is undermining perfect preservation. Let's listen in.
If you have a word, Malik and Malik.
Yes, between the hafs and the wash text.
They mean 2 different things.
Between the hafs and the wash, you're using an example.
Not just hafs and the wash,
Yeah.
the other readings. So you have these 2 different words. They may be written the same in the Uthmanic consonantal skeleton, but be 2 different words, but different readings.
Okay.
So one could be readings of Hafs from Asim, and other one could be readings of Warsh from Nafi.
Do you notice how this young Muslim's faith is being destroyed? Listen to it. And watch what happens as he slowly figures out the implications of the Islamophobe's argument.
We've established that there are textual variants within the Quran. Now, using the example that you've just given, if I'm right, the word that you used has a slightly different meaning, doesn't it? The
I
two
just
words.
told you they are different.
Yeah, they're different meanings. So what we have, in essence, is a variance of meaning at the word level. Yeah. Is there anything deeper than that? Are there any variances of phrases, sentences?
You see, when you start to doubt, one thing leads to another.
Is there anything deeper than that? Are there any variances of phrases, sentences?
And we have to listen some more as our young white friend begins to doubt the standard narrative entirely.
Is that all of these Muslims that for years and years and years have been telling everyone in the world that the Qurans are identical across the world, they're wrong. That the Quran has not been changed, not one letter, not one word, not one dot, not one tittle. All of these Muslims that have been saying that, you've just said that they're all wrong.
This is so sad. That expression on the young man's face as he sees the standard narrative crumbling is simply heartbreaking. Brothers and sisters in Islam, the only solution to this is a clear statement affirming perfect preservation.
So Muslims on planet Earth or elsewhere have no doubt whatsoever that the Quran has been preserved to the letter, to the dot, and to the sound when we talk about this.
Unfortunately, there are more examples of doubting perfect preservation. I have to show you another one again. I'm doing this to prepare you. This is the most egregious example of doubting the standard narrative that I have ever heard.
These are very, very difficult issues. And the most advanced of our scholars, they're not quite fully certain how to solve all of the unanswered questions in there. Traditional understandings of ahruf and qira'at cannot answer some of these pressing questions that are now being poked. The standard narrative has holes in it. That's what I'm going to say. The standard narrative does not answer some very pressing questions.
But this is not true. The standard narrative does not have holes. It's been repeated too many times by too many people to be false. But listen as this same Islamophobe continues to spread his Islamophobia.
And when we say the various different ways to recite the Quran, we are not talking about different voices or different styles. We're talking about slight differences in pronunciations, slight differences in letters, slight differences in harakat. In other words, if you were to compare two printed Qurans, you're going to see differences between them.
Wallahi, this is nonsense, and I'm so sorry that you had to hear that. But what do? We do not doubt. Let's hear a confirmation of the standard narrative by a real Muslim authority.
From his time up until our time, there has never been two copies of the Quran that are different even in one letter or one word.
And this gives us some examples of the earliest mushafs that were written, and they are available to this day. Anybody who wants to compare letter for letter and word for word.
This brings us to our next point. There's yet another tactic by these Islamophobes that I need to warn you about. They'll try to undercut the authority of Muslim scholars who affirm perfect preservation. As we try to affirm the standard narrative and cite scholarly support, Islamophobes will simply claim they're not authorities. Can you believe it? Watch as this faithful Muslim brother recites the standard narrative.
My understanding from the Islamic point of view is that perfect preservation means there is no change in any of the Arabic word for word, letter for letter.
But then this really large Islamophobe, who it seems had to shear about 300 sheep to make a pullover that big, disputes the standard narrative by undermining the authority of prominent Muslims.
Good.
Right.
Where's the source for that?
Muslim scholars.
Who?
Okay,
One
Zakir
name.
Naik.
Zakir Naik is not a Muslim scholar.
He's not a Muslim scholar.
No,
Ahmed
he's not a scholar on this. He's not authority.
Okay.
He's not authority.
Shabi Ali.
Not authority.
I'm just going to keep naming scholars. You're going to go, not an authority.
They're not an authority.
So suddenly, after 1400 years, we can't trust the authority of Muslim scholars? For shame. But you know what to do when we encounter Islamophobes like this. Recite the standard narrative that we know to be true.
The Quran has been preserved, we believe, since the time of the Prophet till now. Word for word, letter for letter, haraka or vowel sign for vowel sign.
This has been admittedly a difficult video. We've seen the sad face of a Muslim who was presented information that contradicted the standard narrative. We've heard numerous Islamophobes trying to make a simple concept like perfect preservation more complex, as if it's not even real. Some have said outright that the standard narrative is false. But it's been necessary to expose you to the criticism of Islamophobes because it's no longer possible to avoid. People are increasingly calling into question miraculous preservation. So when you encounter this criticism, remember, recite the standard narrative. That is what you can put your trust in. You've heard it here from me. And if you can't trust Imam Icy, who can you trust? Don't think too hard about that question. It was supposed to be rhetorical. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.